So yes, get comfy, grab your tea, your coffee, what have you. It's going to be a great chat. And to start, I do want to begin with a land acknowledgement. I want to share that the land that I'm standing on today is the traditional territory of many nations. They include the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also want to acknowledge that Toronto, where I am calling in from, is covered by Treaty 13, which is signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaties signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. And also, I should add, I'm Bridget MacIntosh. I'm a colleague and friend of Cate's, and I'm so honored that she's invited me to help launch this book. Very exciting. I read through it. It is a fascinating read. Again, leverage the arts ecosystem to influence local prosperity, authored by none other than Cate. And I could go on and on about Cate. We've worked on many projects together. But I'll share with you that she's the founder and principal of Proctor Consulting, and her consulting practice is built upon 20+ years of guiding performing arts venues, arts service organizations, and festivals in strategic planning, operations, audience development, fundraising, marketing, and governance initiatives. So we can all appreciate arts administrators. They do everything, and they do it well. Existing at the intersection of arts and business, her work is anchored to her academic research, business principles, and creativity. In 2017, she was recognized for her contributions to arts and culture by Member of Parliament Mona Fontier during Canada's 150 sesquicentennial celebrations. In 2020, Cate co-authored the Arts and Culture chapter for the Alternative Federal Budget, we had the pleasure of working on together, which was published by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Cate is also the Vice President of Arts Consultants Canada, and she co-chairs the Mass Cultures Research and Policy Working Group, again, where I have the pleasure of working with her. She is also the Regional Alliance Representative for Arts Pond's National Digital ASO project. She's a former member and co-chair of the Canadian Arts Coalition's Research and Policy Committee, and she supports arts sector development through roles in advisory groups, boards, and arts councils. She's presented at numerous conferences and academic institutions and has facilitated discussions about the arts sector and its development, equitable digital justice, the value of the arts, and the intersectionality of arts and business. Her book publication, Leverage the Arts Ecosystem to Influence Local Prosperity, was released in September. So congratulations, Cate. It distills findings from research and practical experience, offering a holistic strategies and tactics for arts administrators and community builders. So Cate, welcome. And before we get into it, I should also share with everyone, we are recording this session so that Cate can put that up on her website. So again, if there are any concerns, feel free to keep your camera off or change your name. But we just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware that that was happening. And again, I'm Bridget MacIntosh. I'm happy to be here and to host this. So to just kick it right off, Cate, what inspired you to write the book? Why now?
Oh, well, thanks so much, Bridget. Just before I answer that question too, I'm just thinking as I look at my screen and everyone has their cameras off, and certainly feel free to show your face as well. Like, don't feel that this is the you have to not. I'm not able to see your face, but if that's your choice, absolutely. So I say, yeah, to what inspired this book? It's there's a lot of pieces of what you've recognized or what you've brought forward in my introduction as far as an arts administrator, having that life experience. I had firsthand experience of the challenges of an arts administrator, particularly as they wear so many hats and there's so much different pressures on them to run an organization, and the types of organizations are varied, of course, but it's I guess ultimately it came to the point where having had the experience and having had some success, I was hearing conversations from other arts administrators of the challenges that I had, that others had, and some of those challenges were just not going away. And I thought, I've overcome some of these. I felt that if I could take my information, my findings from research that I've done and my own experience and put it into some type of a handbook or a resource that was good for others to learn from my experience, I thought that would be valuable, and it seemed like there was a need. I spoke with other arts administrators about some of their challenges, and they said definitely, if I had something to help me through this, it would just be so beneficial to them. So that's kind of why I did it. And as far as why now, the research that I did, the academic research I did was during my studies a few years ago. But the findings I found at that time were coming into the public realm about 2017, 2018. So it seemed really relevant for this knowledge and combination of research that I did, that it was very timely to put it out there now at a point where people were talking about these same types of entities or the same types of opportunities that were out there. So it just seemed very timely, and I was anticipating putting the book out in May of this year, but then we had COVID hit. So it actually gave me that opportunity to then add the COVID lens onto my research and what I was presenting in the book. So that really helps to make it yet even more relevant during this time right now when the arts sector are struggling so much, and they need to just really dig into resilience as far as how do I manage, how do I get through this, and how do we get through the other side of COVID. So the timing, I feel, is really good, although that last piece was, of course, it came out, it blindsided us, right?
Yeah, definitely. And I remember mentioning too, it was great that you had the opportunity to get those last minute edits into the copy just because of the impacts on the sector. And moving on a little bit more with the book, I've got my copy here. Cate, I'm hoping you can talk a bit more about this cover, before we get into other more subject related questions. But yeah, lots going on.
Sure, there is a lot going on, and I'll hold up my copy as well as I talk about it. I should mention that this copy, the design was by an artist, someone that I met. I'm originally from Prince Edward Island, and so I reached back to that artist to do this work for me. And so it's by and whole her design based on information I told her about inside the book. So the first thing that you're drawn to probably are the two hands, which are blue, and they represent coming together, partnerships, building relationships, as you would anticipate. You can't maybe see from here, but this hand is solid and this one is more transparent. And the purpose of that is that this other hand is coming through or on the other side of this circular piece. And what the circular piece represents, so those two hands are at a distance from each other. So the circular piece represents, of course, the clock. Everyone sees pretty quickly. And that's time. Time is of the essence. Time marches on. But within that circle as well is a labyrinth. And the labyrinth represents challenges. It represents multiple pathways and perhaps going down one pathway and then you need to reverse and come back again because there's no straight path in the labyrinth. So there's lots of challenges in there. And then so those two hands coming together, there's a lot of pieces that need to be undertaken in order for them to join. But also, of course, there's splashes of paint on there as well. And the colors, the orange is actually, it represents creativity. So that's very art-centric. And then the blue and the aqua, they represent knowledge or authority on a topic or authority generally. So that's why those colors were chosen. And so that's generally where it comes from. And I should mention Alina Herwire is the designer, and she may be on the call today. She was planning to join us, but a shout out to Alina for the great job on that book cover.
Excellent. Great. And I know you have broken the book down into two parts, and I understand not everyone on this call may have read through the book yet, which is great. But in the first part, the arts ecosystem, you refer to the artist as the germ of the ecosystem. So just hoping you can tell us what you mean by this, like artist as the germ.
Certainly, certainly. I find in my work in the arts, often the artist tends to get not forgotten and not set aside, but just somehow pushed to the back. And so in my research and in my experience, it's really the artist is the person, the entity that drives the whole sector. Because, and I'll explain that further, because as the germ, think of a seed, like, planting a seed, and from that seed, everything else happens. Well, when we look at an artist, their role generally, it's multifaceted, but they reflect ourselves back back to ourselves. So they reflect society back to us. They bring us insights that we might not think of as a people, and they bring all of this through creative means and through different disciplines in which they work. And through this work, they educate us. Sometimes it's quite eloquent, sometimes it's quite stark, but they're using and maybe intuitively, not necessarily consciously, but they're using their arts discipline as a way, as a conduit to give information to society, and then we receive it and we interpret it. So it's not necessarily what is on the paper is what everybody interprets the same. No, but they give us information that we can then decipher as what this means to us. But as we do that, as the artist does that, this creative work that they're creating, it is then content that flows through sometimes other processes. So for example, if you have a writer, maybe their book stays as a book, that's fine, but there's still processes to get it to a book. But maybe it evolves into a theater production. Maybe it evolves into a movie. So that content that the artist develops, it moves through different processes and different phases of the arts ecosystem. So we have to remember that if we didn't have the artist, if we didn't have their creativity, there would be no content to move through. So as the germ, as the seed, and as the basic element of the ecosystem, that's why I refer to them as the germ, because without an artist, nothing else would happen.
No, fair enough. And when reading through the chapter, you speak a lot about the tension between the economic sectors and the creativity sectors. And, is creativity just for economic gain, or, the conflict between the two? I'm hoping you can elaborate a bit more on that, because I think we're always pressured to make economic arguments. And so
Absolutely. And that was one of the challenges when I was referring to earlier, Bridget, as far as when speaking with people in the arts. A lot of external factors or external forces from the arts, they look for that economic gain. And so it's a way of almost using the arts. So I'll refer back to the title of my book as Leverage the Arts. So don't use them, but leverage them. So when we talk about this tension, you're absolutely right. With artists, there's that creative flow. There's a lot of emotional connection from their work to people. And there's a lot of qualitative impacts. And so qualitative is really hard to measure. And sometimes they flow over many the time frame could be many months, many years, but there is a definite impact and a definite positive impact. Whereas economic development, it's based more on finance, it's based on numbers, it's based on money and building and growth. And so when you have this highly creative entity and then you have a very business-oriented entity, trying to come together, there's different drivers there for each. And so the mix of those two doesn't always happen well. But that's not to say it doesn't happen or that it can't happen. So it's finding that point of intersection where these can meet and then building from there into a project, some type of an initiative that both parties can win from. And so that's where you get into the mutual benefits. So if you can have these two otherwise tension-oriented pieces coming together, but then they're working towards the same end point, that's where we can get some collaboration happen. But it doesn't necessarily come easily because, again, of these drivers and these factors that are behind each different entity, but it's certainly possible.
Excellent, great. And before I get to the next question, I just wanted to welcome the people who have joined us in the past few questions. I'm Bridget, here in conversation with Cate. Thank you so much for joining us. And Cate, my next question is about the arts ecosystem that you speak so much about in the first part of the book. And I'm just curious about who else participates in the ecosystem. And I think you have an image that you refer to in the book. So I'm just going to attempt to screen share that here.
Okay.
With my stealth tech skills. I believe that has worked. Let's see, might take a second. There we go.
There we go. Okay.
Huzzah!
How's that?
Excellent. Yes. Who else participates in the arts sector? Sorry, arts ecosystem.
No problem. And so this is a component of the arts ecosystem, and is really dealing with the arts sector per se, because the arts ecosystem is much larger than this. But this basically drills into some of the points I was making to this point. So it shows three main entities within the arts sector, within the arts ecosystem. So we have the artists, we have the arts sector intermediaries, and those could be any type of entity that presents, performs, or develops an arts discipline, let's say. And then we have creative industries. And so creative industries, you're getting more into that business side of the arts sector. And it's within the creative industries, you're talking scalable, whether it's scalable distribution, whether it's opportunity to scale income or revenue sources. Whereas the arts sector intermediaries and the core artists, they deal a bit more with the creative side. But what you should also capture within this graphic is that the overlap between the artists and the arts sector intermediaries, it's significant. You know, this isn't to scale by any means, but you have quite a bit of overlap between the two, because one definitely supports the other, and they work pretty closely together. Then as well with the arts sector intermediaries and the creative industries, again, you have overlap there. But the creative industries are so large that they can tend to be a little bit more on their own without working with those other two. But to also look at the overlap between the artist and the creative industries, that little tiny triangle in the bottom center, there's not very much there. So that's where we can start to find gaps. So gaps between that creative content and valuing the creative content that I mentioned earlier. So when you have these larger gaps between the two, does the value of the creative, does the value of the artist actually get lost in its own ecosystem? So this graph looks like it's linear. It's not intended to be that, because the pathways are multiple. They're not one straightforward way within the arts ecosystem, but it's just to show that flow of creativity if it does go to the creative industries. So understand that. And the other thing that should be noted on this is technology. Technology, as we know, everything's going digital right now. Look at us, we're here today doing a book launch online, which is fantastic. But technology generally, it had started in its within this framework more intensely on the creative industry side. So you had more technology there, whether for distribution, whether for actual production purposes, and then slowly technology has worked its way the opposite of what I've just described into the arts sector intermediaries, which is the theaters, libraries, museums, et cetera, and then to the artists, where technology now for artists, initially it was, of course, to promote themselves, but now more and more it's becoming part of creation of the art. So it's interesting how the creative flow, the human creative flow, seems to go one way to the creative industries, and the technology is coming back the other way.
Oh, excellent. And I'm going to keep this image up for my next question, unless you feel,
Yep.
no, Bridget, we're done with the image, we're all good. So you talk a lot about what a vibrant arts ecosystem is, and you've done a lot of research and have utilized, your academic skills to help find that. So I'm hoping you can tell me a bit more about those research. So when it comes to a vibrant arts ecosystem, what do your research findings point to? What makes that happen?
Sure. The evidence, the research that was coming out of that, there was, of course, a whole host of factors. And in my book, I break it down into three main considerations. And then within each of those considerations, there's other subgroups. But so I'll tell you what those three considerations are, and I'll touch on the subgroups. So the first consideration is a holistic awareness and development of unique local assets. So there's a lot in there. So the holistic approach is basically you're not thinking of just one entity within the arts sector or the arts ecosystem. You want to look at a holistic view of who are all the partners, who are the stakeholders, how can the action of one impact the action of another, or the recipient or the benefit of another. And when you talk about unique local assets, you're talking about not resources, yes, and resources can be vague or it can be many, many things. But the assets, why I refer to it as assets, is because sometimes there are elements in our local communities that either are forgotten about, or they're used for one purpose and one purpose only, or something is so familiar to us that we don't consider it an asset. So, as an example, there may be, if you work in the theater, you work in a really unique environment, and many people don't work in that environment, and it's normal to you, but it's totally not to someone else. So you might use that, an asset off a really nice lobby or your theater itself, to invite others to participate in a different type of programming within that environment. So that's a real asset. In a community level, you might be talking about architecture that you have, and architecture is more and more being recognized as value, but you might have something very unique that no one else has, whether in the country or in your community or your even your province. So it's recognizing these different assets, and they're not always tangible. Sometimes the assets are intangible. It might be traditions, it might be stories, it might be resources you have in people or skills. So it's just take that holistic approach to what potentially could be those assets. The other thing in there is authenticity. Authentic, authentic, authentic. So many times in this economic development or any kind of development, you get a cookie cutter approach, probably because it's the most efficient cost-wise to do. But if you find it demands authenticity, whether it's in whatever these assets are, whether it's in your approach to your relationships. Artists tend to be able to sniff out unauthentic anything pretty quickly. So if you want to work with an artist or in the arts sector, it's really important to be authentic in your approach. And of course, that leads into the partnerships as well. And another aspect of that is the cultural development, long-term, multidimensional, multi-beneficial, and self-sustainable. So when you're thinking of that holistic awareness and the assets, think long-term. Don't just think short-term. Don't if it's a one-off project, great, but try to extend the pathway for longer-term results. So that's one consideration. The second one is public awareness and engagement. And I found that in many arts organizations, particularly smaller arts organizations, there is so much to do that the arts administrator or administrators are focused on developing the content from inside their organization. And not always is there public awareness of what's going on over and above ticket sales. So it's really important to try to develop rapport with people in your community outside of asking for money, outside of asking for ticket sales, and just general conversation, finding shared interests. And that way you're building public relations all the time. And you're building engagement. So, and you're offering that opportunity for curiosity and hopefully invitation, whatever it is that you're involved in. The other and third consideration is embracing heritage in new ways. So that could mean often people think of heritage as something in the past, and it may be traditions or it might be buildings, for example. But there's contemporary work that's going on right now, and not to be afraid to combine contemporary and heritage together and recognize that even though we are present day, we are building heritage today, because in 10, 20, 30 years, what we're doing today will then be our heritage. So just think of new ways of how to incorporate programming into well-established heritage buildings or places, and take traditions into new places that maybe if they're used to one location, take them somewhere different. So don't be afraid to mix that up. And so that's generally the highlights of some of the research, but we drill into it more in the book.
Oh, definitely. And I'm just going to stop my screen sharing now here, just to go back. There I am. Excellent. Because what I really like about your book, Cate, is just the rigorous kind of research that goes into this. It's not just here's some ideas, here's some strategies. You've really taken like an academic, evidence-based approach. And to that end, you talk a lot about the focus matrix, and you even offer a link to readers to go to your website to learn more about this resource. And it seems to be the thing that you have used to apply to your research and to come to your findings. So I'm hoping you talk a bit more about that.
Sure, sure. And yeah, the focus matrix, it is a tool that I developed myself, and it was out of necessity because when I was doing my research, I found there was so much information coming at me, and it was getting very confusing, and some of it was overlapping into multiple aspects of what I was collecting. So that's why it's called the focus matrix, to help me focus. That's where the name comes from. But basically, and you're right, Bridget, it is available on my website. There's no paywall or anything because I thought this was so helpful to me. It may be helpful to others in their work. But basically, it's an analysis tool that I developed, and the main pieces of it is built on an X and Y axis. And as I mentioned, the artist being central to the sector and central to the ecosystem, everything comes from that. So there was 6 artistic drivers that I was finding in my research. And what those refer to are elements that make it possible for the artist to do their work. And it covers the gamut, starting with creative works. They need to be somewhere where they can actually be able to make creative works. So whatever that environment is, that's very closely linked to place. So they have to be in an environment geographically that is conducive to making these works, whatever it is. That same place, you want to have linkages to the arts ecosystem itself. So when we looked at the graph, we were talking about the arts intermediaries. And so that it could be the traditional, what we think of, like theaters, stages, etc. But maybe it's also universities, because universities is where there's a lot of knowledge, and that can impact or influence maybe what an artist develops as well, because when you're around deep thinkers, that was one thing that came up in the research. Also, non-financial resources, and that refers to, it could be as simple as product or tangible or intangible that an artist uses in the development of whatever their creative work is. So having access to those non-financial resources, it may be support networks, it may be the actual products that they use. And then there's visioning. So what that means is it's very important for an artist to be able to be in an environment and be in a space where they can envision, because they are a visionary in so many different ways based on what the research was telling me. So they want to be able to take whatever it is that they envision and draw it into their work. And so to be in an environment where they can do that. And then economics is the 6th. And what that refers to is being able to make enough money to survive, really, because so often artists are, they can't, unfortunately, make a great living or enough to survive. So they need to be in an environment where there are other options where they can make money, ideally still through their art, but if not, something so that they can certainly survive. So then moving to the other side of the focus matrix is the 7 arts ecosystem stakeholders. So this is when we were looking at the graph, I said, well, there's more to it than just what you see here. So this is where these more to it, these other pieces come in. So of the 7, I'll just go through them quickly. There's the artist, there are the arts intermediaries, the different arts organizations. The 3rd is heritage and museum. That is a component of the ecosystem. Then we get into the municipalities, or that civil level of government. The residents within that community, of course, are important. Then we have the businesses. So the whole business sector within a community is important. Again, because these are all entities that there's ebb and flow with arts organizations and or artists. And then the 7th being provincial governments or state governments. And another one was federal government, so they're not to be excluded, but we're talking a little bit more at the local level. So that's the different components on the matrix. So as you can tell, there's a lot of intersectionality within that. And so what that intersectionality within the matrix gives is potential opportunities. So there's windows of opportunity where there's components that overlap. And so those may be a starting point for any one of these entities to work with an artist on any one of these areas that they require for to create good creative works.
Excellent. And moving into the second part of your book, Cate, you talk a lot about partnerships and different approaches and ways to maximize that. And it's so handy. I mean, even for those of us who have been doing this for a long time, it was a good reminder about, oh yes, like that type of approach, that type of pitch. So my question going into partnerships is, how can you partner with the art sector when you're not a part of the art sector? Because you might have, other non-creatives accessing this book and just they don't even know where to start. So any advice as to how to partner when you're not in the arts?
Absolutely. And you've made a really good point, Bridget, in the fact that there is that hesitation. There is a bit of an intimidation when you're not familiar with something to then go and want to be part of it or approach to find if there's a connection there to work together. It's a two-way street. And this one I find it's not only up to those who are outside the arts, but primarily it's up to those who work in the arts, because many are intimidated to come to the arts, so the arts need to come outside. So this is the first approach, and then I'll talk about both. But with the arts, I'll say organizations, it's a matter of, we were talking about relationships and maybe going for sponsorship or funding for a particular event. That's okay, and that's really necessary, but maybe have a conversation with someone just out of curiosity. Maybe do a bit of research to know what are the values of a certain company. If they have one of those assets that you're looking for that would be beneficial to you, what do you have that you could offer them? So if you do a little bit of research, talk to others, find out what's the values of this potential entity that you're looking into, and just go with the conversation. Go, like, make an appointment to talk to someone or find someone who knows someone if you can get an introduction. And then from there, don't do a pitch. This is not the point to pitch. This is the point that it's a long pathway and you're just building a relationship. And then from there, through conversation, you will be surprised what you will find out from each other as points of intersectionality and common points of interest. And from there, you can build onto the partnerships if that's to happen. Also, you may meet a person and you just may not, the personalities just might not mix, and that's okay. Walk away from that. As far as if you're looking for a long-term partnership, I don't mean walk away from the person literally, but so that's one thing. But the other thing too is, so you want to provide that, reduce that barrier of intimidation, and provide a doormat of invitation. And so there's multiple ways to do that, and I describe that different ways in the book. But basically for the arts sector, to provide that door of invitation to others so they're not intimidated. There was an interesting finding, and this was from 2015. It was from Business for the Arts. And they did a survey of small and medium businesses. And this was in Canada. And 65% of small businesses said they were not involved or partnering in the arts because they weren't asked. So I thought that's amazing as far as, so it shows again that we, or anyone working in the arts, we really need to make that additional effort as far as to lower that barrier to intimidation and throw open the door as well. So as far as to answer your question on the business side, again, it is through, I would hope if we have people outside the arts reading this book, they will have those ideas or hopefully gain those ideas to see that their involvement with the arts and their staff's involvement with the arts through partnerships and through working on different projects with arts organizations or artists can really benefit their business overall. Partially because their staff will think differently, they perhaps work differently. There's implicit positive reactions to being involved with the arts, and that one can transfer to staff. And the other thing is just, it has said, the research showed me, which was interesting, that businesses that are involved with their community and particularly involved with their with the arts and are making a difference, a positive difference, customers will like that. And customers will come and do business at your place of business because they like what you're doing with somebody else. And that's the same in other community organizations as well, but it holds true in the arts as well.
Definitely, some great advice. And, despite all best intentions and, making the invitation open and welcoming, you're still going to encounter those situations where not everyone will get the value of the arts and the purpose and all of the good and the benefit that comes from the arts sector. There, people just, some don't get it. So I'm hoping you can share with us, like, despite all the good things you've said, how can we continue to advocate to non-believers?
Absolutely. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to let the book speak, because I'm going to read something from the book, and that will give you a
Excellent.
flavor both of the book and an
Yep.
answer to that question. And to say it comes back to the human impact. Okay, so as far as to find believers or who are non-believers, it really is connected to that whole human impact. So granted, not all people have a propensity for the arts. Some community members' eyes glaze over and will continue to do so when you mention arts. They do not feel affected by or connected to art, socially or otherwise. For those people, I wonder, do they read, authors or artists? Do they remember a special song that takes them back to their youth or a momentous occasion in their life? Musicians write songs. Did a movie or theater production ever awaken an emotion or make them think differently about a different event or topic? Playwrights, actors, musicians, and a host of other artists and technicians contribute to this work. Do they think, that's cool, when musing about a practical application of visual or contemporary art, whether in a gallery or on the side of the building? These are artists. A significant concern surrounding the influx of artistic content streaming during the COVID-19 pandemic was presumed devalued artistic output due to an increased level of free access, meaning active or passive engagement with art at no cost to the consumer. Some argue democratization of the arts is an important component for wider social inclusion. The appreciative response to share and comment on artistic content during the pandemic is evidence of that. As highlighted during the COVID-19 pandemic, the social benefits related to artists' presence in our society go far beyond ticketed events, sponsorship benefits, or entertainment value. Emotional connections are made through art that impact us all, young or old, near or far. The arts are a platform that encourages team building, creative thinking, problem solving, and friendship. The arts can introduce options and uncertainty to shift the roles and intentions of others. It is hard to measure how personal experience with the arts impacts each of us, but this same experience is key to understanding the overall value of the arts among many.
Excellent. Thanks,
So
Cate. And
you're welcome. So it
yeah,
gives you a little bit of a flavor. And from there, you'll hear that there are pieces in there that can be used for advocacy, that can be used to when speaking with others in your community. Depending on whatever your conversation is about, if it's purposeful to build a partnership or just general, everybody has that opportunity to build value for the arts and for artists.
excellent. And I think on that note, I'm conscious of time. I was hoping we could open it up to the floor for any questions. I know you've shared a lot of info, Cate. So at this point, to all of our attendees, if there's any questions, feel free to type them into the chat box, or you should be able, I'm not sure if you're able to unmute yourself to say something. It will tell me and I can unmute you. But yeah, the floor is open if anyone has any questions. I'm gonna wait, nothing yet. Give it a second, and if not, Cate, while people might be waiting to figure out what question to ask, just to continue looking at relationships and partnership development. Oh wait, there's Diane Davey. Where can we find your book? It's a question. So
Okay, sure. Thanks, Diane. I will note Diane was one of my advanced readers on this book. I had a host of professionals in the arts sector who graciously gave me their time to read the manuscript and help direct me. So there's Diane. Thanks, Diane. But yeah, my book is available online, both through Amazon.ca, Amazon.com, Amazon worldwide, I think, actually. And it's available in both digital and print format. The print format seems to be only available through the States right now. It's intended to be available through chapters in Indigo as well, but it takes different time frames, I guess, to come up online. Again, this is all new to me as far as publishing this. But yeah, so it's available in those locations. And if you're in the East Coast on Prince Edward Island, it's actually available in a store there called the Bookmark. So again, as I mentioned, that's my home province. So they were very gracious to take some copies of my book and have it available there as well.
Excellent, great. So I was just saying, as people figure out if they have other questions or things they'd like to share, just speaking a bit more about relationships and developing those. Are there any other additional strategies based on your research and your own experience? I know you've got some great examples in the book from your own experiences about building successful relationships. So any tips that you can share on that front?
Yeah, I touched on this before, and it was around authenticity.
Yeah.
I found that, and this is particularly when you're talking fundraising or anything to do with money as well. So that's the hat. I have the arts administrator hat on when I'm saying this. I was running a theater, and I made it a point to be at the theater when productions were going on, at least as people were coming in and maybe up until intermission, because it gave me that opportunity to talk to audience members, to get to know some of them. And if I had board members there, they maybe would introduce me to people. And so it was really important for those individuals to have a connection to me, just for the fact it makes people feel special if they know who's someone who's running the theater, and it adds another person in my network, as far as, number one, just a person to know, but to be curious about what it is that they do, and start that conversation again, because you never know what you're going to uncover within a discussion that could then lead to another contact or another partnership or someone else that would be interested in your organization for any number of reasons. And I find when doing that and when having that true curiosity and broad-mindedness in your approach to people, there's so many opportunities that I've had and initiatives that I've taken on that were so successful that led from just general conversations. Like one was working with an embassy here in Ottawa. There was a Doors Open, which is, I think most people are familiar with that. It's like an open day to explore heritage buildings. And we ended up having an actor go into the British Embassy in Ottawa based on a conversation I had with somebody who came through our door. But it was a partnership that worked really well, both for them and for us. And I won't get into the details of it, but that was something I didn't reach out for it, but we had that opportunity, and we built a really great relationship with the British Embassy, as example.
That's amazing. And I think, just again, going back to the idea of artists being the germ, the core, like without the artist, we have nothing. So going back to your experiences, can you talk a bit about how artists provide opportunities for others? I mean, I know this lends into like the advocacy and things that you've talked about, but for, I don't know, new administrators who might be reading your book, people who are relatively new to the sector, how can artists provide opportunities for others?
Well, the artists aren't necessarily directly connected to it, but it's an outflow from their work. So as an example, say you have a theater artist, okay? So they are taking the time and learning how to be in a play, let's say some type of a theater production. So there's a bunch of artists who are maybe coming together, or maybe it's a single artist, but the presentation of that work, that play, whatever it is, it causes people to come out to obviously the event, or hopefully that's the idea. but in that, maybe those same audience members are going to a restaurant. Maybe people are coming into town, like maybe they're from out of town. So again, this leads into the economic piece. So there are businesses that are running, that are having a benefit from this happening within a community. So the artist isn't directly, connected to that beneficiary, but they are providing a spin-off effect for someone else that's not related to the art at all. So that's one example. So there's a lot of those economic examples that are out there. But there are also, if I can go into the social or the well-being side of it, there are also, if you think of artists, maybe a row of artists in the summertime, and there's a pathway, and people can come and wander through, there's always a
Mhm.
real sense of joy or curiosity or interest when you have artists doing whatever they're doing, or maybe it's just their work that's displayed, say within a street in the summertime. There may be restaurants there, et cetera, but you just, the socialness that creates, so you're bringing people
Mhm.
together, so there's a real value in that. There's also the mental change in people as far as they maybe feel elevated, or they feel joy, or they feel it's not a stressful point necessarily for a lot of people, I would think, to come through that type of an environment, right? So there is spin-offs both in mental health and the well-being, and this big thing is the social, and social is inclusionary. You get to interact with people that maybe you didn't otherwise. So the arts are very bringing people together. It's a real
Excellent.
important piece of what they do.
And Cate, I see Rebecca. Hi, Rebecca, good to see you. She's posed a question to us. Again, as past municipal workers, each of us. Cate and Bridget, I was wondering what your thoughts were on the relationships between municipal workers and volunteers, organizations, or community members within the creative sectors, particularly around the challenges with enabling action. So I hope I said that right. And Rebecca, if I'm missing anything, think
I can
I've
fill in the
unmuted.
gaps a little.
Yeah,
Sure.
go ahead.
Yeah. So what I was thinking about and what I've been like kind of challenged with in the last like little while in the things that I've been involved with out here in Oshawa, outside of Toronto, is the challenges that come with looking to our government counterparts or people that we like lean on within the creative sectors to sort of get the work done, and the challenges that are posed either with people or organizations like leaning on them too much, to rely on them to like be the people who are running with all of these things that people within the creative sectors want to see happening within their communities, and then sort of the pushback that comes from that, and then sort of on the other side of it, like volunteers or people out in the out in the communities who are trying to make action toward like doing things, and sort of get met with those like brick walls a little bit, and red tape, all of that kind of stuff. Like with that push and pull relationship, like what is your experience with like figuring out a common ground and like sort of defining where government needs to maybe have a bigger role or take a step back and enable their community organizations and volunteers to run with more things?
Mm-hmm. There's a great question, and that's one of those challenges that never goes away that I was talking about earlier. Is it's a power struggle for sure. That's part of it. Some of it can be egos that are in there. One thing that I find that works, that has shown to work well, is bringing those from the arts sector to the table of the decision makers. So that could be arts council members, it could be artists themselves, and coming into that room with the municipal decision makers, meaning that you want to have both coming together to develop whatever an initiative might be, or to discuss what are the challenges, so that each can see the other's point of view. And as opposed to one dominating or one saying, this is what we're going to do, now here, go and do it. They may not have the full picture. They may not have an understanding, especially if one doesn't work in the arts and the other doesn't work in municipal government. They don't know the challenges that each other face. So the best way to do that is through communication and through bringing people together, with the understanding that this is a discussion, with the understanding that, yes, and again, you have that challenge of the municipality probably wants to see certain results, whatever those are. And so it's understanding that this is what their intention is, but maybe working into the conversation, we want to try this, let's see what happens. And if you can bring it to that place, then no one's going to lose, right? So it's just, so that's my best suggestion. And then as far as the volunteers are pushing or who pushes who. It's really trying to create that neutral space, because you don't want to have pushing from either end, because then you get into the defensiveness of someone feeling that maybe their voice is not going to be heard. So yeah, so it's just that's my best advice there. Just any other question on
The
that?
thing that I've been sort of reading a lot about. Oh, I see someone else has joined here from Oshawa, and I think I saw Greg Murphy join. He's on the Cultural Leadership Council with me with the city of Oshawa. So the thing that I've kind of run into, especially out here, like in Oshawa, is like this level of apathy that I think people have developed over years of trying to, make things happen or be a part of things, and it's a lot of start and stop. And so there's a guy out of the US who is actually like working on this particular subject, and he's his name is Jeff Sigler, and he runs this whole thing around Revitalize or Die. It's it's pretty harsh, but I mean, he's really all about like treating our communities much like we treat like people. Like when we have, when we really tap into showing that we care about our communities feel like love and all of these good things, and it really creates like and fosters healthy communities and that kind of thing. And so he's really about addressing a level of apathy that I think a lot of people, who attempt to like be a part of things within their communities, or get just are hit on with all that red tape stuff and all those challenges, and like eventually you get a chip on your shoulder and you're like, you become one of those people who don't want to become. So I guess, yeah, like how do you go about addressing the apathy, and how do you kind of bring people out of it and like steer, a ship away from those default attitudes and actions that sort of fall in line with that?
Mm-hmm. Sometimes that requires new partners at the table, or new fresh faces, other ideas, because you're right. If you have the same people all the time discussing the same things, and everyone knows everyone's position and nobody wants to give any, or even if they do, there's a certain perception of what you're or who you're dealing with. So sometimes you have to shake it up a bit, and get some new people in there with new ideas, and ideally people who can are very good at communicating, like it can articulate well, and be non-threatening. Like, again, it's building that non-threatening environment. So the components of what work into that can vary depending on the situation, but having said that, Rebecca, there's also, I realize that sometimes there's certain partners that are not going to change at that table, and maybe those certain partners are heels in and they want things their way. So that can be tricky as far as how can you speak to whomever these resistors might be, and that may take effort away from the table. So it may take more of a one-on-one conversation with influencers, say in the arts sector, and whoever these entities are, to build in again some of this value piece that I've talked about, or build in potential opportunity that maybe is not getting an opportunity to get discussed at that table. So sometimes you have to work around behind the scenes, and to bring people on board. And so, yeah, those are a few tools, few levers for you.
Cate, I know this is my stage manager talking. I'm just cognizant we have a couple more minutes here, and I know we have a few kind of quick polls and a giveaway that we want to do. But to everyone on the call, Cate will be staying on the line for more informal conversations. So especially if Rebecca, Megan, and the rest of the Oshawa team want to chat a bit more about that, absolutely, and stay on. So I'm just going to put together a couple of polls, and I got some tools here to play with. I am just putting a link in the chat box to a poll just to give us a sense as to who has read the book or who hasn't started, and who hasn't finished it yet. So if everyone just clicks onto that, and then I'll be able to check and see how that has polled.
And while you're doing that, Bridget, while we're waiting for that to come up, I have everyone's names in here.
Okay.
Can we do that?
Oh, absolutely, yes. So Cate was going to host a draw from all of our attendees for a copy of the book and to have it mailed, if I understand. Is that
exactly?
great?
So I'm just going to dig in here and I'll pick one. I'm actually going to pick two. So two people who are on the call are going to get a copy of the book.
Okay, great.
So this one is Carol Ann Pitchinen. I'm not sure Carol Ann is on the call.
I don't think so, but she's from Ottawa Festival, so I don't know. I think maybe see who's here. What do you think? Is that horrible?
What's that?
I was going to say, do you want to draw another? Is she
Yeah,
here?
I'm going to draw another name anyway.
Okay.
Because Carol Ann, she may have been on and then off, but so this is our next one, Tina Helfrich. So I have contact for all of these people. So
perfect.
I will get a copy to Tina as well.
Excellent. So I'm going to share this, see if it works. So yeah, just so we can see, and this is a great program. I actually learned it from Catherine at Mass Culture. So thanks, Catherine. So there you go. So, you know,
fantastic.
Reading, they're in the middle of it or no. So it's great that you're here and you got a great kind of start to that. And then the next question I have, I'm just going to jump over.
Tell Bridget is the techie on this team.
I try, you know. And this was just to get a sense of who, based on what you've heard in this interview, and for those of us who have read the book, who do we think, like, whether it's artists, what other organizations, who would benefit from this type of book and this type of knowledge? And this will just generate a very lovely word cloud, just to give us a sense. Okay. And of course, I'm just gonna jump screens here. Sorry, I was pretty stealth before, and now it's all like, oh wait, Bridget, what do you want me to do? Yeah. So this is tech catching up with me here.
Okay, and I might add in the other. I guess it's an offer. It's a book offer that I have today for everyone. That if you do want a copy of the book, I'm willing to give it at a price today of $20, as opposed to it's $21.99 in Canada, and plus if I need to mail it, just the cost of mailing, which is $6. So if anyone wants a copy of that of the book, feel free to go to my website, and I have a form there that it's on my resources page, and just fill in that form and answer the question, what are the color of the hands on my book? So if you send in that form and answer that question, I will be more than happy to provide you a book at that price, and we can go through the details at that time.
Excellent. And then this is just a capture, again, using the Mentee program, just where people are thinking, like, who would benefit from this book. So thanks so much for your input, everybody.
Absolutely.
Stop sharing this. I'm going to go back to the main screen here.
Good to see that, because that was my target audience too. A lot of what was coming up there, so that's good to know.
Excellent, great. So on that note, we're at 4 o'clock, so I just wanted to raise a glass. I know this is my water. So Cate, congratulations on the launch of your book. She's
I actually have wine sitting here, and it was
because you're a champion. So
yes.
If anyone has your mug or what have you, feel free to keep your camera on or off. But a toast to you, Cate. Congratulations on the launch of your lovely book, and thank you for all your work. So
and I wanted to throw back the thanks. Thank you for that. I'm really pleased to have it out there, and it's a tool. It's intended to be a handbook tool for arts administrators and others, and I really hope that people can get some useful. It's useful to others, and they get use out of it. But thank you all for joining me today. I'm really thrilled to have you here, and cheers. And Bridget, thank you for all of your help. I could not have done this without you and your technology stealth that you bring, technological stealth. So, so we now want to just open this up. If anybody, I'm going to stop the recording. So we go from here. And